All right, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about how important it is that we marry the magazine and the story idea. But let's look at exactly how we start to do that now, because it is so important to our success as a magazine writer. So step one, read the magazine. Invariably, students will walk in with a magazine and they'll say, I want to write for this, or I have a story that I think will fit this, or they won't even walk in with the magazine. They'll just do a search online, or they'll look in the writer's market, which is one of the textbooks or the website that we have for this course, and they'll say, oh, this magazine is perfect for my article. And I can tell you that I have never successfully sold a story, and I've sold a lot of stories, but I've never sold one to a magazine that I haven't read, because magazine editors know when you haven't read their magazine, and they don't want you to just submit stories to them without any real commitment to their book. They want you to feel like you have some interest in what they're doing, you understand their readers, that you have made the commitment that to get to know what it is their readers might want to have. So when you're reading the magazine, and I advocate reading at least 3 issues of each magazine, get to know the style of the writing that's in there, the types of writers that they use, what is the format how it's structured, who are the readers, what are readers looking for, how sophisticated are they in that particular subject, is it more of a general interest, is it a trade publication, how tailored is it to a specific market, what are the topics that they cover. The last thing that you want to be doing is to be pitching a story to them that they ran a month or 2 or 3 months ago. You really want to give them the feeling that you have gotten to know their book, gotten to know their readers, and you not only are the right person to be writing for them, but you have an idea that they can't live without. Step 2 on this is be original. Don't just throw some idea that would be fairly pedantic that everybody's done. So, if you're going to pitch a story to Philadelphia Magazine, don't say, hey, I want to write a story on visiting the Liberty Bell or visiting Independence Hall. I don't know that they've done that story in the last 5 or 10 years, because it is such a staple of what you would expect from a Philadelphia publication, and it's so touristy that people who live in Philadelphia are not looking for that out of their magazine. So you have to look at something that's really original, that gives a different spin to things. Don't write a story about getting your first dog. Lots and lots of people have had that experience. Lots and lots of people have written about it. Think of a way that you can write it in a way that will be much more compelling to whatever magazine you're looking for. So, looking at the example here of Paris, how many people do you think have been to Paris at some point? And invariably, people who want to do travel stories all want to write about, hey, I went to Paris. Come up with a new angle for it. I can tell you that I too went to Paris, and I wanted to write something about it. I happened to go to Paris when I was 7 months pregnant. So the story that I pitched was, I had never been to Europe before, I was 7 months pregnant, and I dreamed of going to Paris, so I picked up and I went there. This is what you need to know about traveling to Europe or to Paris specifically while you're pregnant. And that was the focus of my story. Paris was actually not super significant in the story. It was sort of a character in the story. What was most significant is the kind of things that you need to do as someone who's traveling for 2. Now, one of the differences between news writing and writing for magazines is what we call a conflict of interest. So in news writing, a conflict of interest is a very rigid line. You can't interview people that you know. You can't interview people who are involved in something that you're involved in. There's a lot of very strict standards. They're relaxed quite a bit in magazine writing. There's a lot of magazines, especially trade publications, that you wouldn't be able to get any writers at all if it was you're looking for people who didn't know their subjects before they interviewed them, or didn't have some intimate experience or knowledge in the field. And there's a lot of expertise that goes into magazine writing. So there's certainly going to be some magazines that won't let you write for them if they deem a conflict of interest in some way, but in a lot of ways the lines are a lot looser. So that means you have to start looking to write what you know and look for ways to incorporate your own experiences. So I have a student who her husband is a cat judge. He goes to cat shows, and she's very involved in the cat show community. She's an ideal person to be writing about what goes on at cat shows, and things that people might need to know about that environment for magazines that cater to those who have show cats. There's a variety of paths that you can take that will you'll be able to help bring a story to life in a way that people who don't have that experience won't be able to, and that will actually make you even more marketable to a magazine. And as I mentioned, you have got to read. Read, 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 read. I know I sound really annoying, and I'm not trying to be patronizing to you, but you have to read not only to be a good writer, but you have to read to come up with ideas. So read lots of newspapers, see what stories are going on in there, read lots of magazines, books, press releases. Look how you can localize any story to a particular readership. So localization in this case doesn't have to be your own local community. It has to be whatever magazine it is that you'd like to be writing for. There's just absolutely no way to invest yourself in the writing world until you're invested in the reading world. And we're going to talk a little bit later about seasonal stories, but this is an amazing resource for finding story ideas. What happened on this particular date that we could turn into a different story? What about this season? If it's winter, people are struggling with all kinds of things, be it car repair or, walking their dog or, getting around on ice and snow or escaping it. So, we look at travel stories that have to do with, escapes that you might not have thought of, or travel stories that have to do with embracing winter weather, or what type of tools that you can use. What are some different things for your shoes or to protect your feet or whatever it would be. There's all kinds of opportunities out there for stories if you just start to kind of look at what's going on around you that happens every year, so you can think about those stories long in advance. Magazine articles, the thing that makes them a little more challenging is they do have to be written fairly far in advance. So most magazines operate in terms of buying your idea no less than 2 months, very often 3, 6, 9 months in advance. So you have to be thinking about a story idea that has that kind of longevity to it, something that you can write and have it still be timely at the point of publication. So these kind of stories fit that bill really well. So I've given you on the iTunes U course several examples of stories that I hope you'll see kind of where the ideas come from. So as I mentioned to you, the story The Home Court Advantage is a story that I wrote for Columbus Monthly. I saw the article in the Columbus Dispatch, and that's what spurred my interest. The Wiles Way is another story that I wrote for Columbus Monthly on a former Columbus School Board member. His name is Mike Wiles, and I thought he was really interesting. He always had a really long ponytail, and he wore Hawaiian shirts to the school board meetings, and he looked really unconventional from a school board perspective. So I thought, you know what, I think I should do a story on this guy, or I think I should see if he's profile worthy. Turned out he was incredibly profile worthy, and Columbus Monthly agreed with that. Think about places that you go. So I pulled a story off for you from Budget Travel, looking at top 10 hotel tips. So not just about where you can stay, but when you're looking for a place to stay, what are some of the things you should think about in terms of those hotels, things that you may not have thought of. So it was a different angle on something a lot of people do. People that you may want to meet. So this is a story that I did also for Columbus Monthly on the new dean. At the time, he was the new dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine. His name is Lonnie King, and he came from the CDC in Atlanta. Incredibly accomplished researcher and a figure in the medical and veterinary world, and was coming to Ohio State. I was really fascinated by what he had done in the past, would have loved the chance to talk with him, ended up getting paid to talk with him. So this is just someone I wanted to meet, and I was able to successfully pitch a story. Looking at the season, Christmas means a lot of things. One thing it means is Christmas parties, Christmas party dresses, so I've given you the link to that story. And then what happened in history. So as I mentioned, there's this story on the Kennedy assassination, looking at it 50 years later, but looking at the conspiracies that have been fostered over the last 50 years. So, this is just different ways that we can approach stories and different ways that we can develop ideas into story themes.